And so the clan mother said, well, she said, we want to adopt you and you become Onondaga. And that was procedure and process that the peacemaker had established 1,000 years ago when one of our great leaders of that time was adopted into the Mohawk Nation. It's a foundation movement, established that process. So adoption is really common among our nations across the country. They always do that. They have so many ways to do that. Personal, family, or national adoptions. And so she said, bring your brother along. And I had 6 brothers. Which one? The young one. Holy crap, he was wilder than I was. And I said, you sure about that? And bring him along, said, if he'll come. And he did. And ramping up to today's time, he holds the title Tayat Kai, and I'm his sub-chief. He's fluent. He wasn't then. Tadadaho. We have Tadadaho here. Where is he? Hey, Tadadaho. He's the leader of the Six Nation Confederacy. I knew his father played lacrosse with his father. And I knew his grandfather. I watched his grandfather's movement. I learned a lot from him in lacrosse. So I'm in that age group of transition from really old style, old people thinking into contemporary times. And we have to adjust to the circumstances that surround us. And that's the nature of this business we're into right now, making this adjustment, continuing our identity. This is fundamental to this discussion, your identity. Who are you? Your nation, your name, your clan, your history, your future. That's the battle that we're in. It's a very purposeful battle. The policy of the United States is to assimilate all native nations into the mainstream of American life. That's their policy. And that's what they've been after all these times. The history is terrible history, has never been told. The word genocide applies. They have to make new words, ethnocide, moving people from one place to the other, destroying their culture, assimilation. And they went after the language. They went after the language. That's the first thing they went after. As I said, because the language is the soul of a nation. And right now, on the last count, I could be off 1 or 2, but 565 Indian nations are still here today with relations to the federal government today. And how many are not here at all? How many are just now names that we hear about? But we carry their songs. We carry a lot of their instruction. So the battle for identity, then, are you Onondaga or American? And isn't American Italian? Wasn't that Amerigo Vespucci? Wasn't he Italian? And we're American Indians, and wait a minute, isn't Indians from India? Right off the bat, 1, 2, American Indians. How far off base can you be? Amazing. But, that's how we are, that's what we say. But no, we're Hopis, we're Cheyennes, we're Arapahoes. That's who we are. Tuscaroras, Oneidas. And it goes on, 565. That's our identity. That's what you're fighting for. So how do you maintain your identity? Well, jurisdiction is a discussion. This is law. We move into those terminologies now. What is jurisdiction? And then what does jurisdiction mean? That who has the last word on where you live? That's how you determine who's in charge. Who has the last word on where you live? Jurisdiction. Oh, there's a big battle going on. Big fight going on about that. And the process of passing this fight on to our children and next generations is important. And as one old leader told me, he says, don't ever look for relief because it's never coming. He says, as long as you got land, you're going to have to fight for it. And you're going to have to instruct your people to fight for it. It'll never stop. So I pass that on to you, kids. Fight is on, and it always will be. If you got land, you got to fight for it. How do you lose land? There was a story that was told when the traditional circle of Indian elders and youth were traveling about the country, and we were way, way, way up north, near the Arctic Circle, and we were speaking to the indigenous people there. An old man, well into his 90s, was silent, and then when we spent a full morning explaining who we were and why we were there, he spoke. Oh, he said, now I can tell my story. And he had a great cross he was wearing. And he told about a journey he had been on. And as a young man, he said, I was the best there was in trapping. But what happened to me, he said, was I fell in the river through the ice. He says, that's about the worst thing can happen to you up there. He said, I was strong enough to get back all the way to my camp, but I couldn't get to the fire. I could see it, couldn't make it. He said, so I fell into the snow, and he said, and I laid myself on my back and assumed the position of the dead. And he said, I did that because I knew in the spring when they would find me after the thaw, they would see that I did not panic and that I was in charge of myself, the best of my ability. And then he said, and it was warm, I felt better, and I heard that that's what happens. So I was getting comfortable, and then a voice told me, get up. And he said, and I sat up, and there was a beautiful land. And he said, there was a stream. He said, and these people said, wash yourself in the stream, come here. And he did. He went to the other side, and they said, put these clothes on. And he did. And he said it was a beautiful place, and he could smell the berries, and he could smell, it was a beautiful land. And they said, well, you're here kind of unexpected. Not really your time to be here. They said, but since you're here, then we're going to show you some things. And so he saw, they showed him, they said, this old man telling us now, and he's telling us in the language of the dog rib. And that had to be translated to English, and that had to be translated to Spanish, and that had to be translated to Aztec, because that's how many people we had there. So it was a long story. But very, very interesting to us. And he said he was standing at a precipice, looking down, and he could see the curve of the earth. And in front of him was a cross. And they told him to walk out on that cross to the end. And he said he was very fearful, but he did. And then they said to him, "Step off." And he said, "I couldn't move." They commanded me to do this 3 times, he said, and then on the 3rd time they said, if you don't do this, you may never be able to come here. He said, that made me step off. And he stepped off, and he was instantly standing back with them. And they showed him. They said, "What do you see?" He says, "I see my land. I recognize my land, the rivers." And then he says, "I see a dam." "What is that?" "Water." I said, "In time, what's going to happen? And your people will move here." And they showed him several of these things, and I can't remember everything, but then they said, looking at the earth, it was that time of dusk, and you could see these lines of lights. And he was describing, what he was describing was a city, but this man had never been beyond where he lived. He'd never seen a city, didn't know anything about a city, but that's what he's describing. And they said, "Observe." And a huge explosion took place in that city. I said, "This is coming." It's a long time ago when we were up there. And so here we are, right? And I add that little story on because I think it's relevant to perspective today. Gayana Shana Gona, the great law of peace. That's our instruction. The great law of peace. Peace, union, be united. Be fair to everyone. Instruction, constitutional instruction. It's carried us up to this point. There's a long ways to go, and we have also insights into the future, which I won't go into. But I will say this one thing in regard to that. First of all, it's not good. Not good, what's coming. But the person that was given this information long ago, over 217 years ago, he was shown all of this, and he was given our people instruction how to, four protectors, again, as was mentioned, spoke to us and said, "You're going to have to adjust yourself." That was clear. The reason why we're giving this information is we clearly did not give you enough information for you to survive what your brothers bring across the water. So we were given this instruction, survival. And interestingly enough, that one of them was a deck of cards. They said, "Tell your people this can destroy your nation." 200 years ago or more. And of course, trappers out there in the woods, middle of the winter, passing the time of day to check their traps, morning and night. What's wrong with a game of cards? I was driving up on my way to Santa Fe, coming up that main highway, and I came over to Rise, and in that valley, ace, king, queen, jack of hearts, 16 feet high. I said, I wonder. Take care. Be careful about the values your brother brings. Return to your values, the ones that share, to share. Our brother made a constitution, and then he had to put an amendment, the Bill of Rights. Wasn't good enough, he said. Oh, we didn't do this right. So the Bill of Rights. Well, I think it would have been better if we had a Bill of Responsibilities, not rights. Because that's what we do. We are responsible. We're responsible for ourselves, our future, our conduct. We're responsible for the earth itself. And we are the people who give thanks to the earth. We know how, boy, do we know how. We got ceremonies, good ones, and we carry them on around the lunar clock. We carry on these ceremonies, and that's how we teach our children to respect the earth, to respect the corn that sustains us, to respect all the life. Not only respect, but defend it. Be responsible. Take care of it. So water, yes, water is the first law of life, no doubt about it. And what are we doing with that water? Well, we got a test going on here in this country, in this part of Turtle Island. There's a shortage. So now we're going to be tested. We're going to be tested on how you share, and how you protect, and how you defend. And our brothers and our families, who are now in defense, and the Lakotas, which we all talk about, and which we'll be having discussions about. Defense of the earth, defense of the water for the future, for your children, for all life. What's different about today? That was from our forefathers. Well, one way to look at it, to get a perspective on that, was in 1950, in 1950, the population of the earth was 2.5 billion. And it took a long time to get to 2.5 billion. It took the lifetime of our species to reach that number. Today, there are 7.4 billion people in the world. That's what's different. In fact, our brother is going to name the next, I don't know what we call it or what he calls it, but Anthropocene. We have now entered, what would you call it? The time of Anthropocene, the time of people. We've affected the whole earth to the point where 7 generations is pretty murky. When you look 7 generations, and we do that, that terminology comes from the Haudenosaunee, it comes from the great peacemaker. He said, instructed our people, when you sit in your council for the welfare of your people, Think not of yourself, nor of your family, nor even your generation. Make your decisions on behalf of that generation's coming. That's where that comes from. 7 generations. It's an instruction. And if we do it, and we do it right, we ourselves will have a good life. That's how we'll benefit. But we have to be adults about this. We have to be grown up about this. You know, there are a lot of shortages in this world. A great deal of shortages in this world, and it's happening fast because of our numbers. You know, we're soon to be 8 billion and soon to be 9. I mean, coming within the next 10, 12 years. Water, resources, land. We have to sit and counsel. We have to, I don't know, it was mentioned several times that kind of a circus going on that they call an election. It's funny, I mean, funny if it wasn't so serious, you know, but it's still funny. Still funny. But talk about deterioration, talk about loss, talk about when you're talking about, when they speak about the founding fathers, and Jefferson and Washington. Franklin was probably the father of this country. And he's the one that said, pay attention to the Iroquois. They have a system of unity that we could benefit from. That was Benjamin Franklin. And there was a meeting in Pennsylvania, 1744. And there was a big discussion going on there about land and so forth and history. And I must say this about our brother, he kept good notes. He kept careful notes. And you can go back and you can read them, you can find them, they're there, you know, they're still there. And these notes that were at that meeting in 74 were sent to Philadelphia, and a printer by the name of Franklin printed that book. I saw the original book. And he, as he was printing, he read it, and he said, "That's a good idea, this union, this idea," because that's what we said to them at that time. Why don't you make a union like ours? And went on. He said, good idea. And so, in 1754, he called the Albany Plan of Union, based on that discussion 10 years before. And they weren't quite ready for it, but they were moving in that direction. And one of the main speakers there to illustrate that was a Mohawk leader, explaining the idea of union, peace. Good words. Well, it goes on. 1775, the eve of the revolution, they came to us again. Our chiefs were meeting with them, Albany. And they said, we're going to raise your great tree of peace here. And those white roots are going out from here. This was the Continental Congress telling us. And as that great philosopher said, Yogi Berra, you could look it up. It's there, in their words. 1775, the Albany Plan of Union. Our chiefs there. And we said, well, we know your father. Know him very well, we know you. Not a good idea to get in fight between a father and son, as you well know. Every time you step in a family fight, they go, let's jump on you. So that was what they were saying, and they said, good. So we struck a treaty of peace and neutrality, both with the English and with the colonists, the new Americans. They were now Americans. They used to call Indians Americans at that time. But now they were Americans. And Felix Cohen, who wrote the Federal Handbook on Indian Law, wrote a small story, and he said, and this story was titled, "The Americanization of the White Man." You could look it up. And so all of that comes here now. And so in these days coming, we have to think about the laws that prevail, the laws of nature, the laws that rule. They will rule in spite of us, in spite of our nations, in spite of our great congresses, in spite of our great meetings, in spite of all the words of the human beings. Nature will prevail. And if you don't understand that, you suffer the consequence. And that's where we are. We're here, as I said. We know how to do these ceremonies. We know how to respect this nature, and that's what we do. And we have to instruct our brother again. And maybe, in the future, there can be peace if we try hard enough, if we work hard enough. And remember, human beings are a species, not a race. You're not black, yellow, red, white. No, you're a species. You're like dogs. Come in all colors and all sizes. Still dogs. So we're still humans. And, there'll be a time when you go to the hospital and you're going to get a pint of blood, and it's going to come from your brother. And he could be black or white. So how close can you be? So we are a family. And that's our instruction to our brothers. Get back to being the family. Get back to our original instructions for the future. Be adults. And the shortage I was talking about, applies to everybody. There's shortages everywhere and everybody's suffering. And I became aware of this shortage a couple of years ago. And you know what the shortage was? Big lines waiting. Yachts. Not enough yachts. I wasn't in that line. So, these terms are relative. They're relative. Can be applied to a lot of different things. So what is our shortage? Our shortage is in goodwill and peace. And that's the great tree of peace. It's still there, it's still standing, and it's still moving. And our leaders are here to do the best we can to join hands with you to the common cause of a good future for our children, the 7 generations coming. Thank you. Big question here, who's coming under this blanket with me? Nyawaha, thank you.
Kashi Kotanamatuakia. Good morning to everyone. My name is Tia Oros Peters, and I serve as the Executive Director of the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples, and I want to thank all of you for being here. For those who are familiar with our events, we don't take a lot of formal breaks until we eat. Sometimes our time is so precious, and so we will keep moving. We will keep moving. That doesn't mean that we expect you to not maybe need to stretch or get a cup of coffee or all the different things that you might need to do to take care of yourself. So we know that may happen, the ebb and flow of people in the room and out of the room, but we'll keep moving. And on Indian time, and to some extent, we'll try to stay within the framework that we have built. I'd like to make sure to recognize some of our partners that we have not yet mentioned. Academia Semillas del Pueblo with the Anahuac Preparatory University, Marcos Aguilar and his team. Outstanding partners. Olin Law and another outstanding partner that in conjunction with UC Irvine Law School has arranged for continuing minimum legal education credits for the State Bar of California. So anyone who would like to do that, check at the front desk at our registration table, and you are able to get credit for these discussions, these conversations, and the teachings and the learning that we'll have here. I want to again make sure we acknowledge and thank the Indigenous peoples, their ancestors and their future generations of this area we are here on the Hashiman and Tongva shared territories, and thank them for allowing this event on this beautiful territory. UC Irvine Law School has been outstanding, as has our host committee, the UC Irvine Sustainability Initiative, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, Humboldt State University, College of Professional Studies, the Aurora Project. You'll see a list of our sponsors and supporters in your program. And every once in a while, we'll lift up a name. Doesn't mean one light is shinier or more important. Sometimes when someone has a lot, it's easier to give a little. What we see is that when someone has less, they often give even more, much like the description of cutting the bean in half, right? There are also some amazing, amazing people in this room, and I'm sure during the reception you've already seen last night, begun to connect with people, stand together. Brilliant, distinguished speakers, wisdom keepers. I'd like to hold up Elsa Stamopopoulos, who's formerly the Bureau Chief of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Thank you so much for making the journey, Elsa. Amazing and brilliant work that you brought forward. I would like to hold up and thank the Tadadaho Sid Hill and Betty Lyons from American Indian Law Alliance for being with us, for standing with us through many different pathways. We really have so much love and respect for you. Peggy Well-Known Buffalo and Susan Kelly for making the journey from Crow Country. Delegations of the Pulikla, of the Tairona, of the Ainu. Delegations, our wonderful sisters, coordinated by Sandra Creamer, longtime sister in the international arena, brilliant attorney. Cassie Lang and our other sisters from Aboriginal lands of Australia, the Maoris. And I'd also like to make sure to mention and thank the delegation from the Pueblo of Zuni, the Ashiwi, and thank you so much for making the journey here, and for the Rock House Project that's one of our partners to this event. I have the unique pleasure of introducing someone that many of us have stood with also. When we think about standing together in reception, outside with our coffee or our water, our snacks, some of us have stood together on the front lines of sacred sites. Some of us have walked for water. Some of us stood together for ceremony. We've sung together. We've cried together. We've organized, we got things together, we dreamed, we imagined, we waited, we looked at our watches, we thought about things together, we planned, we called, we emailed, and some of us went to Standing Rock. Some of us are in Standing Rock in our hearts, watching it on Facebook, looking at the news, seeing it's not there. Some of us are hearing about it from our friends and relatives who have been. And few of us have had the opportunity to go. And then there were a few more. And then there have been thousands. And still they go in and they go out. When we were there, the row of cars and people never stopped around the clock. Thousands and thousands and thousands. It's a marker in our time as Indigenous peoples here in this land, but really a marker, as Deborah so exquisitely said, Standing Rock is everywhere. And it has ignited a memory and a determination, not one more. For those of us who have to stand against genocide, terroricide, aquacide, not one more. This is it. This is a stand we're taking. We have the great honor and pleasure of having Chase Iron Eyes, who is a critical leader and pivotal person on the ground in Standing Rock. And I'm so happy he was able to take time out of his schedule to come a long way across the continent to come and be with us. Chase?
Is this mic on? It is on. Okay. I'll just do a quick introduction up there, guys, and then I want to show a video. First of all, it's an honor to be here. It's a privilege to be here. We're fortunate to have people like Oren Lyons with us, people like Dr. Henrietta Mann. It's no accident that we have a room full of strong, beautiful, powerful spirits and minds coming together from all over the globe. I was very happy that I was able to bring my daughter. She's 13. I just texted her and said, "Get in here." She's got free Wi-Fi, so I guarantee you she's on Snapchat or something like that. But we are facing a time of great crisis. We've always been facing that time, though, as Indigenous peoples. When I hear our elders speak, it's clear, it's evident that there is something innate in us as original peoples, as Indigenous nations, Native nations, tribal nations, whatever term of art that you want to use. We have a connection, a divine right to determine our destiny, which has always been there like a sacred fire. And when we think about the theme of the conference, there's a word in there called resiliency. So resiliency is a little different than resistance, because resistance implies that we're organizing or we're sending energy against something. And that's important. It's important to do that. But resiliency implies that something else, something inheres in us as human beings, as tribal nations, as bodies, as a species, as humans who are expressing different aspects of a divine order, of a spiritual order. Now, we're not always taught these things when we are raised in the academic tradition of the West. We're not taught that we are instinctively seeking and trying to create a divine order. We're just taught that we were half naked, wandering around the plains, following buffalo. Even the buffalo, who were here long before us, long before humans. And it's a different universal element for each of our peoples who are gifted with song, gifted with knowledge, gifted with ceremony, gifted with inspiration, either through prophets, through visionaries, through women, through sacrifice. They would have us believe that Indian people, quote unquote Indian people or indigenous people or brown people, are the only indigenous people on the planet. But as Oren was saying, indigenous is not a color. Go around the globe and find people of various phenotype and skin color who have a connection, a respect relationship with something that Dr. Henrietta Mann called universal kinship. That's what this is about conceptually. That's what, when we look around a room like this, it's a brain trust. It's a group of people who are, taking the responsibility amongst themselves to lay the conceptual, and it's a spiritual and conceptual framework for how we can express ourselves as peoples, as governments, as individuals. How do we seek self-determination? How do we make it real for the ancestral guard? If you don't know who the ancestral guard is, I just learned about him right before I came in here. There's a group of young men sitting right here. And we talked about how do we make decolonization real? How do we make that real for us? Because I learned that word, I was 18 maybe when I read In the Spirit of Crazy Horse by Peter Matheson, he's no longer with us. I had the opportunity to meet him my first year of college. But that's where I learned the word decolonization. I didn't even know what that was. Especially growing up where I grew up on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. And it is an Indian reservation. I mean, the people who first had to move there called that place Ian Wosla Okashke, which means the place at Standing Rock where they are confined. So it's not only a physical confinement, but it's a mental confinement. This set of institutions, legal institutions, federal Indian law, I'm an attorney, political institutions, economic institutions, social institutions, media institutions are constraining the true and original cosmology or thought process or divine inspiration. That's what decolonization is about, but the ancestral guard are decolonizing and they don't even know it. Because we've been disconnected from our food source as a human species, which is a method of colonization, we no longer appreciate that connection to our food source. For us out there in the plains, it was the buffalo. For, on the east, maybe it was corn. In the southwest, it was corn, or it was salmon. It was a different sacred entity wherever you were at, in this hemisphere or in the world. But these young boys are learning how to fish and to trap salmon on old school boats on the same rivers that their ancestors did for thousands of years, for time untold. They're creating a direct relationship with their food source, and they're giving it to their elders, to the community members. And one season they couldn't do it, and the elders knew about it right away and started calling their tribal governments and, hey, where's our salmon? They must have thought it was some kind of a program, but it was these boys that were doing it. But I wanted to open up with just some of those remarks, because what's going on here is very serious. It's no accident that you're in this room here today. Whoever you might be, wherever you may have come from, you were meant to come here to get something and to give something. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my story. Somebody's going to have to help me keep time, Tia. Because I'm in a strange place right now. When Tia asked me to come out, I knew where I was coming. I'm coming to the stronghold out here. I'm coming to a group of people who are motivated, who are connected, and who are coming from that original place. And who are trying to make that live, trying to pass that on to our coming generations, our children, the people that we're connected to. But where I'm coming from is a United States congressional race, where I'm running to represent the state of North Dakota in the United States, a settler state, which it just causes this cognitive dissonance. But it was meant to happen. I certainly didn't plan to run for United States Congress. After we created our digital presence, our brain trust to accomplish certain things like protecting sacred sites, and we were able to do that by buying back stolen land called Pesh Law back in 2012. We were able to found Native Lives Matter, which tries to address the systemic and institutional oppression of the legal institutions and all of those places which are killing Native people and which are imprisoning them. We were able to accomplish a lot through our adaptations, our evolution. As original peoples of this hemisphere, we've done nothing but adapt. We've done nothing but survive. We've always been that way. But I want to talk to you a little bit about Standing Rock, what's going on, because we live there now. I still don't see my daughter in the room. Tokata, are you in here? Okay. I was going to go text you, like literally right now. Sorry about that. I'm a dad first too, But we were, when I was going through law school, and it always takes a strong Native woman to kind of save a Native guy. I don't want to, imply or break any rules or whatever, but that's how it happens. And so her mom had it completely together at Denver Children's Hospital in Denver. She was living there. She was a doctor. She was already had everything going. She's a rock star. And I came there, basically poor, hungry, disheveled. And very quickly, though, sometimes people, they send blessings your way. And so I was able to get into law school by moving to Denver at that time. But our family was, we were raising our family outside of Indian country. Like they never lived around Native people. And so 2 years ago, my wife, who's a pediatrician, and she could speak about how, the healthcare industry operates just like the legal profession, where they try to get you in, get you out, make the most money possible off of you. She got tired of that. And so she moved us, she applied for these jobs all over. We had to talk, and we were like, we should go somewhere where, where you're appreciated, where we can have the most impact. We can use the skills that we've gained. We can use this modicum of success in the Western world, being educated, professional, self-sufficient, all that stuff. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But we should we should go help where it's most needed. And I was thinking, like, let's go to Haiti, let's go to Africa, let's go to one of these countries, right? And she was like, okay, yeah, let's go back to the res. So Standing Rock is the res that ended up hiring her. And that's how we got back to my home. From birth to 19 years old, that's where I lived. I lived on this tiny little island, this little peninsula along the Missouri River. And that was 2 years ago. And now, in April, is the time that I started running for Congress. And it was symbolic. You got to watch for these signs, because there's signs out there. When I was driving to my convention to seek the endorsement of the Democratic Nonpartisan League, I ran into the caravan of horse riders and about 200 cars with teepees, and they were on their way to establish the first camp, the first resistance camp. And it was symbolic because I ran into them and they were in the way. There was no way I was going to make it to my little political function with these Indians blocking the road. So I literally had to turn around and take a different route to get there. And little things like that happen all the time, where there's little messages out there. This is going to be an issue. This is where you need to pay attention to this. And so now the camp has been going strong since that time, but the real the conflict, the resistance to things that are capturing the media's attention started happening around, I would say, in August 11th, somewhere around there. Like I said, I was running for Congress, and so I'm trying to fly low-key Indian here. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to rile up the resistance here. I'm trying to wear a tie and button the buttons up and talk about taxation and Wall Street and the bailout and. So I'm, and here's another signal, okay? So I bought a boat, right? I'm living the first world dream out here. I got a boat. And I got my kids out on the boat. We're going boating. We're going to go on an inner tube. They love to inner tube. And I love to see them, love that. And so we're about to go out on the inner tube. I get a text, your wife is in Morton County Jail. And I was like, what? Because it was 5 o'clock and she's at work. So we jump out of the boat. I run to Bismarck or Mandan. Come to find out, she took leave to drive somebody else to the protest. But she gets there and she sees that the protesters are allowing construction to happen. The way that most Americans know to protest is a constitutionally protected right to peaceably assemble, right to a freedom of speech, right to say as loud as you want that you disagree with some certain policy decision or some certain law, but that the project, the offending project that you're voicing against, constitutionally protected, is going to happen anyway. But you can say as loud as you want that you don't like this thing. We're protected under the law. We're free under the law to do that. So she gets to the protest, realizes that construction is happening, and that people are inside of a little barricade that the cops built for the protesters to protest within. And like I said, strong Native women, sometimes you can't. If I was there, I literally would have tried to talk her out of that. Iron Eyes for Congress doesn't need his wife getting arrested at the protest. So she stepped out in front of one of the trucks, and she's on film saying, "Hey, you guys, this is our land. This is our land. You don't have to let these guys bring this equipment in here to build this pipeline. Don't be scared. Let's stand up. What are we going to do? What else are we going to do if we don't have water? If we don't protect this?" So just like how Oren was talking about, we have, instead of rights, we have responsibilities. With those responsibilities comes the duty to protect these gifts that give us life, that allow us to sustain economies. What I've found in running for Congress, I can't tell a group of, Germans, Norwegians, Swedes, Scandinavians, Russians. I don't call them white people in North Dakota anymore because they have a culture. White people is like a word like Indian. I can't tell them that water is sacred. I could, but if I tell them that all forms of economic development and national security flow directly from water security and a fresh water resource, then it's understandable in the Western economic lexicon, which if we admit it, that's our economic reality. I learned to speak English as a first language. There's a whole lot that I'm not getting that's just flying by me because of the archetype or the paradigm. Think of it like a railroad. I'm on this railroad now. No matter how bright I am, no matter how perceptive I am, how much I listen, my universe is going to be colored by what I'm interpreting from this railroad, this language, this set of perceptions, assumptions, set of morality, what's right, what's wrong, what's up, down, left, right, what's forward, behind. All those terms are relative. They don't have any real existence. Okay, I went out a little bit off the road there on some college professor stuff there. But I want to show you the video. I'm going to try to be even more jumping around than Oren was up here, okay? It's very hard to do. And also, seriously, in our culture, sometimes we don't celebrate our people. Like, these are rock stars sitting right here in front of us. These are people that we grew up hearing about. We grew up reading about. I remember when I was 18, when I went to my first, back then it was the United Nations Draft Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Many people in this room have put in countless hours, thankless hours, spent time away from their families, made sacrifices to make sure that that work came to fruition. And there's still a whole lot of work to do. But the right people are here in the room who can do it. But I want to show you this video. If the guys in the back of the house, this is your cue. Okay. This is September 3rd. This is September 3rd. Like I said, when my wife got arrested, I thought if I'm worth any salt as a man, I better have my wife's back. So I began going out there, formulating my analysis to communicate, my support for the protesters who are really humanity's last hope. You guys in the room and the people here who are willing to make these sacrifices are humanity's last hope. They're sending a signal to the world that the carbon economy, the abstraction that occurred between our spirit and our mind, between our work, our labor, and any